Our Naples Mac User Group meetings are each and every Wednesday until June 30th of this year, and then resume again on September 1st. They're always from 11:30 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. You must be a member of Naples Mac User Group or an invited guest of Naples Mac User Group to attend our Zoom meetings. And that is basically for security purposes concerning Zoom. We have 42 of these weekly meetings a year. I also wanted to welcome all of our Naples Mac User Group members who are members of these other user groups throughout the United States and the world. So we have a number of members who belong to our group that are members of other groups, and we certainly welcome you. I just wanted to review an email today that I asked a new member, how they found out about us, and it sort of summarizes and a lot of what we're trying to do as a group. This gentleman is a member of SWAX in Fort Myers. That's the Fort Myers Mac User Group. And they were talking about us at their meeting recently, and our name came up. He checked it out on our website. He also had met Bob Kenedi, our speaker today, through the Fort Myers Camera Club, and Bob often speaks. Bob is probably responsible for 4 to 5% of every member that belongs to the Naples Mac User Group. Bob has been a member of this group for 27 years. He's been on the board 2 to 3 times and has personally recommended and been responsible for bringing many members into the group. So this sort of brings up what I wanted to say is that we encourage you to invite your friends, your relatives, your neighbors to join the group if they belong to another Mac user group. Most of those user groups have one meeting a month. We have 4 to 5, and I would encourage you to encourage them to join our group and continue to stay with the group they're with also. We're very proud of our new website. We invite every one of you to go visit it as soon as possible. All the information of all the meetings and pretty much everything we do is on that website. And Jenna Cox and Michael Kowalniak have been responsible for putting this thing together with a lot of help from our board of directors. So please visit it. You'll be very proud of the Naples Mac User Group. For example, here's a list of the May meetings, and there's a list of every meeting now until the end of December of this year. All that information is now on our website. I want to review a few of the meetings coming up. On Wednesday, June the 2nd, we have Victoria Herring, who is sort of a recent new member within the last year. And Victoria is also the president of the Des Moines Mac User Group. And she's going to be doing the first meeting of the month, the Q&A meeting, covering features and operations of all your favorite Apple devices. Plus, she's going to cover decluttering and cleanup, a very important issue for all of us. The meeting the following week will be our own member, Jim Corsica, our Apple TV expert and genius. And if you have any questions, please email them to the email address you see here, and it'll be on the notices about the meeting. It'll primarily be a Q&A meeting, and it will be on the new Apple TV device. If Jim is able to get a hold of it, and we're hoping he does. Jim, is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, but fingers crossed, I should be able to get one on Friday. My connection to the Waterside Apple shop says there should be plenty. So fingers crossed. And that's
Okay.
next week, not the week following June 2nd, George.
Yeah, it's May 26th.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And then, of course, today is Bob Kenedi, Process Your Photos for Impact. For some reason, I always use the wrong year. Bob has been, and we're still discussing it. He's either been a member from 2000 or 1995 or 1997. So he's been a member for quite a few years. And like I said, he's been a major recruiter of new members. He's very, very, very active in the photography world of Naples, Fort Myers, and all of Southwest Florida, and has brought in a lot of members. And we welcome Bob, and it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I'm going to talk about processing for impact. The session was inspired by really Apple putting a lot of effort lately into photography, and one of it is significantly improving the capabilities of the Photos app as far as adjustments are concerned to your images. In the overall sense, they have come pretty close to what the Lightroom, the kind of lightest relevant application of Adobe can do, except that processing images has a major distinction, distinction between global processing when we are making adjustments to the entire picture versus local adjustments where we selectively make the adjustments. And that's still missing from photos. So I use the Adobe apps, but I will be also showing a little bit of photos. My main purpose is to get you interested in processing your photos. And why is one question I will answer, and how is not one that I answer, but I will demonstrate and give you some examples.
Bob,
Myself, sorry.
Bob, let me stop you for a second. In the center of your screen, you have a Zoom live transcription closed caption. Do you see that at the top center of your screen? Click on the X and to get rid of that. All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself what is called a photo enthusiast. I'm by no means a professional, but I think being a member of our clubs and really getting involved in our dealings with photography, we make ourselves a little more and call ourselves enthusiasts. I love doing photography. I'm inspired to learn constantly. It never ends. And I like very much to discuss photography. I would consider what I'm doing today is to discuss with you the whys and hows of photo processing, not to preach any of it, nor to really teach it in any depth in that short amount of time. So my intent is to share my thoughts and experiences about processing, show the why and the how, and really one thing I want to get rid of, and that's calling it editing. I hate the word editing, and I tell you why.
Actually, I got it. Way back here.
I'm sorry? I heard some. Okay. As Ansel Adams said, the negative is the score, the print is the performance. In digital photography, that means that the image file is the score and the display or print is the performance. Doing the performance is not editing. A singer does not edit a song when a singer performs it. Or Ansel Adams, who was a pianist before getting into photography, did not edit what he played on the piano. It's interpreting it, it's processing it, it's performing it. So think of your images as talking and making it clear what you want to say and make your sentences, not just using the words, but meaning what you want to convey. So I think, and I hope that processing your images will be inspired and make more enjoyable with the advances that Apple is making in the Photos applications. Intuitively, we make the assumption that somebody who views our photo sees them the same way as we do it. The first part of my presentation is really to convince you why that is not true. To make anything like this to happen, to bring our pictures even close to saying or conveying the impressions that we had for the reason to press the shutter and take the picture to our viewers, it's important that we put ourselves into the process of developing the pictures, not just capturing the original picture. Sorry, I had a interference. And I clicked the wrong thing, and that happens.
All right, can you drag photos back over to the number 2 screen?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, not photo, but Keynote. No, put that back. Bob, put that back where it was. All right, you want to take Keynote and drag that over. Do you see your Keynote app?
The Keynote app, where?
Do you see Keynote at all? There we are. You're back.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Ansel Adams said, we make, not take our photographs. And making the photograph was, in those days, very expensive, very complex, and basically only done by professionals. Whether they admitted it, like Ansel Adams did, or not, like many others tried to hide it, their pictures were either processed by themselves or very, very skilled labs that were working on their instructions. In digital photography, it's entirely up to us how much we want to involve ourselves, and we can entirely get rid of preset processing and do what we want to do. So photography, unfortunately, is full of very bad, very mixed up and very confusing definitions. So I thought it would be useful to go through a few terms that I will use in the presentation and define them. So that's what I'm going to do next. These are the terms: seeing the scenes, seeing. What do we mean by seeing? The scene, what do I mean when I say scene of the picture that I took? About, intent, content, and impact. Rather than going through this chart, I'm going to go and illustrate each of these one by one. Seeing is not just glancing at something, looking at it. How many times you look at something and you moment later don't know what you looked at? Seeing is to perceive, to memorize the scene or photo, even if for short term, to really look at it with attention. And actually, memorability of a photo, to me, is a key measure of quality. If you think about it, high quality pictures you remember, and others you forget. Now, the other important thing is when I say scene in my presentation, I don't mean just what you're looking at. By scene, I mean the entire aura, the atmosphere, the character, the ambience of what we see and what we feel about the subject and its surroundings. Again, Ansel Adams, and if you listen to my previous presentations, you know I really highly appreciate all the teachings of Ansel Adams. One of them is saying that the camera cannot capture mood, but the photographer can. And that's exactly what we need to put back into the picture at the time when we process it. That feeling that we had about the scene, to make sure that even though you look at a flat display on the screen or on paper, if it's printed, or aluminum, if it's printed, or whatever the display method is these days, it's not the same what we saw. And we need to get as much back into it of our impressions as possible. I also find that intent is quite important to do this successfully. For example, when I saw this gorge, looks like a waterfall, but it's really a gorge inside a river, the Swift River in White Mountains, New Hampshire. And if you look it up on the internet, you see a lot of pictures, but none of them will look exactly like this, because that waterfall does not exist when the water is low and does not exist when the water is high. When the water is high, When the water is low, it's obvious why it does not exist. When the water is high, this whole thing is underwater. So I was lucky to be there when it was spectacular. And my impression was fantastic, the whiteness of that water. I went as close to it as safely as I safely could. The whiteness, the sounds that surrounded me, and the energy that I felt that water has was amazing. So my intent was to see how much of that I could give back to the viewer in my picture. For that purpose, I made some exposure definitions or exposure decisions to make sure that the water is alive, it's moving, and it shows its energy. If you expose water very fast, it looks frozen. If you expose water very slow, very long time, then it gives a moving but very, very calm effect. To get both the movement and the energy, I tried the exposure at a certain particular level. And then I had to assure that the overall whiteness I can get out of the print and out of the displays. So I did not overexpose my picture, which overexposing in digital means losing white detail that you can never recover. Underexposing means you might have some difficulty with the dark areas, but you can save what you shot at. By the way, adjustments in photography are very limited if you're using JPEG files, taking out JPEG files from your camera, and is most flexible as it can be if you take RAW files out of your camera. HEIC, Apple's HEIC is somewhere in between the two. If you really want to make impressive photography, you should take those pictures you want to process in RAW files. This is another scene where my intent was to show the calm. My impression was the calmness there, the colors and the calmness. And I'll bring back this picture in a moment and talk a little bit more about it. So much for intent. Now, I'm not going to redefine the word about, but I'm going to apply it to photography. You don't want to take picture of anything. You want to take a picture about what you see. This picture is not a picture of the woman. This is about that woman who apparently loved to dress in yellow, as a very conscious effort of her, because the story also tells that she has blue socks. Why? Because she knows that the blue, which is the complementary color of yellow, will boost the effect of her yellow, fully yellow dress. So that picture is about that woman in yellow, not of a particular woman in there. The content. It is the content of your picture that the viewer will see. So what I define as the scene is captured only, in other words, what you see, we talked about the scene, which is not only what you visually see, but also how you feel about it, the aura of the scene that you captured. And it's only captured in the content of your image if somehow you also capture the mood. And even if a photo is a perfect, clean, and sharp replica of the subject in the background, as I will show in the next image, I don't think it's a good content. In this picture, I believe I captured that calmness of the harbor that sets in at sunset time. One other comment on this picture, I spend most of the time, you will never guess, but I spend most of the time of processing on these boats. And the reason for that is, as you can see, there is a lot of detail in those boats. If I made it sharp down there, very sharp, then it would steal the image, if the mood of the image. You would look at what's down there. If I made it fuzzy, it would ruin the feeling of the picture. So to make it somewhere in between where it fits into the mood, but gives you the detail, was the most difficult part of processing of that picture. Now, here's the quote from Ansel Adams. And on the next picture, I show you one I took in Italy. And I don't really think that this is a great picture. It has fantastic amount of detail. You can see all the detail in every corner. Probably the people captured in there would recognize themselves in a larger print. You can read, if you see it in full size on the screen, the small print on the restaurant faces, and you don't get much joy from it. You don't get the mood of the place. I kind of think that's an illustration of a photograph with a fuzzy concept. Impact. I included the word impact in there, although I think most people misunderstood it, because most images try to get an impact by simply mindlessly blowing up the saturation for the colors, or making it super high contrasty, because that grabs attention. But impact, to me, is more than that. Yes, there is a purposeful impact, is really a purposeful use of visual means, but not only to grab attention, but also to evoke response, to keep the attention. And also, you get impact if you offer something new. So impact is not just your initial impact. Impact lives as you look at the image longer and longer. So to convey our intent effectively, our photo must have impact to compel the viewers to look, and not just to look, but also to see, not just simply glance at the photo, and to respond with emotion. This emotion, maybe that's boring and not look at it, but it's our role as photographers to get the opposite emotion, to get interest and more look at our image. So I don't mean by impact a mindless boost of the color saturation, of the contrast. I mean much more like that. So that second image on that topic is a very different impact. I think I have the impact there where the impact comes from the contrast of the color, where one color represents nature and the other, the black and white, represents you being invited to come in and see nature. I think it grabs enough attention. It hopefully gives to most viewers, never to all, but to most viewers, a response that, yes, that's nice. I want to be in there. This happens to be a corkscrew. I titled that Gate of Sanctuary, and it was the first photograph I ever entered in a contest. And oh yeah, I also wanted to make one more point on that. The three effects of the impact that I say here must be harmonious. By that I mean you can't grab attention to a sad picture with bright, happy colors. You have to grab attention, and what grabbed you, you should find the answer to it. Here, I think it's reasonably harmonious, attention grabbing, and when you look more at the picture, the green inside, it has a degree of harmony. It was in 2007, my first entry into a competition, and I got the first place in creative photography. It was Brent's, no, I don't remember the first name, Brand Silver, who was the judge. She is a photographer of Everglade and a nature photographer. So I was very happy and inspired by that. This one also has an impact, but I don't think there is enough harmony in this. The impact kind of wants you to see, even my title to it that I gave, Turn Baby Turn, you want to see the driver. And without the driver, I don't think the picture has enough harmony. So far, I talked about these terms. Next will be, why do we need processing? If there are any questions at this point, maybe answer one or two.
Victoria, are you still here? Victoria, do you want to?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Very interesting, and I agree with Ansel Adams, and then you too. Thank you very much. I use Aperture still, and because of that, I stay on Mojave, and I know that Aperture was discontinued by Apple. And my real question is whether Photos is sufficiently similar to Aperture or even to Lightroom to justify moving off of Mojave and moving to Photos. I have a Lightroom license, but I haven't used it, frankly.
Okay, I think it's useful to learn Lightroom. I will show some Lightroom front end that you can get from very simple to fairly complex with it. My guess, and you can only guess when it's future and Apple in one sentence. My guess is that Apple is going to get big in photography and will make the next step of improvement in photos, which would be local adjustments.
Okay, and I tend to do some bulk adjustments, if you will. I mean, I tend to work on many images and then pick the ones that I bulk adjusted to work with further. Is Photos doesn't allow bulk adjustments, does it?
That's why I would suggest Lightroom. Lightroom you can have for a cost of $10 a month. And it also gives you Photoshop and some other Adobe applications, but those are the two main ones. They have a very extensive mobile coverage in Lightroom. So my suggestion would be it's worthwhile learning Lightroom. But on the other hand, if you hold out till the next major round of upgrade in Big Sur, you probably will find they move forward in that direction. I can only guess.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Victoria, may I make a suggestion to you?
Certainly.
Excuse me. You have Creative Cloud, do you have Lightroom, or do you have the standalone version?
I have the standalone version. I hate subscriptions, so I avoid them if at all possible.
Okay, so I'm thinking that your standalone version hasn't been updated in a while, or it's like stuck in a certain.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think what I have to do is decide whether I want to do subscriptions. There are about 5 or 6 other apps, not Lightroom, which are close.
Luminar is excellent.
Mhm.
Yes, I have Luminar, and I have kept
Right.
that one up.
Right. What you can do,
Uh-huh.
there is a Lightroom mobile app
Hmm.
that is free.
Oh.
You are free to use it. You are free to use its features. It is very good. Try
Okay.
it.
And
Try
it
it.
has, and it has a front end which is pretty well identical to Lightroom.
Yes. So you can try out the like new or existing present day Lightroom features by
Mhm.
using the Lightroom mobile app.
That's an
Again,
excellent suggestion.
yeah, it's a
on
free.
on the iPad, and then sort of getting myself
Yes.
comfortable with
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And as
Excellent
yeah,
suggestion, Sheila.
yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And as Bob did say, there's a package, and I think it's $20 a month. I don't know if they still have that same photographic package at 10, but it has Lightroom, Photoshop, and I think something else in it for just $10 or $20 a month.
Maybe the 10 is the grandfather, right?
It might be grandfathered. I don't think there's
Well,
a
I'm a
$10
grandfather,
package
but-
anymore. Yeah, it might not be. All right, so there you are. Okay,
Thank you.
Bob, you're welcome. All yours, Bob.
Okay. So we talked about that the viewers see the content of my photo, not the scene that I saw. Thus, they have a different impression from I saw at the scene. And what really triggered my mind to take a photograph of this scene. So my primary motivation for processing is to minimize that difference. My main processing objectives are to optimize the visual impact so that we trigger the interest of the viewer to see, as I define seeing, see my photo. and have content which has an emotional impact. And then by emotion, I don't mean crying, this big things. I mean a chuckle or whatever it is that shows that you have seen the photo and you heard what the photo might want to say to you. So some emotional impact that follows that up and conveys my impression about the scene. And of course, trying to make it in high overall quality, which sometimes requires removing distractions that otherwise would exist in the image. So to short, viewers see different, want to minimize the difference. And the number one issue is to identify those differences. It's not obvious and it's not easy to see. The number two issue is to visualize the opportunities that we have at that moment that we can do by interpreting the file that we have, by adjusting the image. And the third one is to actually have the skill to do that. And that's why my subtitle is, this is where the rubber hits the road. The more creative, more artistic aspects of identifying issues and visualizing opportunities, and the more technical aspect of knowing the application and being able to apply it to do what our vision tells us we want to see. So I found personally that artistically minded people in photography have less problem with these two and have the problem with the solution. And other people like myself struggle, particularly my longest one was this middle one, or I shouldn't say was, has been. It's a constant ongoing progress. And of course, there are flaws I can legitimately mitigate. Usually people ask what you can do, what you cannot do. I tend to answer that question very quickly by saying it depends. It depends on what the intent is with your picture. If you intend to use your picture to prove yourself in court, of course, you don't want to do anything that falsifies the picture. If you are entering a picture into a creatively oriented artistic exhibit, you do whatever you like. And everything in between, partly limited by yourself, what you consider your style to do, and partly by the rules. So if you enter exhibits or contests, read the rules. We have different rules in the 3 different local photo clubs, the Florida-wide organization where we compete. Those are different. Almost before every time I enter, I reread the instructions and limit myself by that. My own limit is to say what I saw, and if I saw the wire, the telephone wire, I include it. If I didn't see it, I don't. If, you know, that's kind of rule that I have. But in order to help identifying those issues, that came mainly in preparing this presentation, kind of looking back. These are not classifications. These are just hints how to make your thought process. They could come from the camera. Why? I'll get into it one by one like did before. They could come from the scene. They could come from myself. They could come from the display that is intended. And most importantly, our understanding of the viewers. So I'll go through that one by one. You look at this image. It's a two-dimensional image flat on the screen. Is that what you see? No. What you see is a three-dimensional cat. That's called cognitive optical illusion. What you look at is flat, but you see is three-dimensional because you see with your eye, with your mind. You look with your eye and you see with your mind. Your mind looking at this image can clearly say, that's a cat. That cat is alive, and the alive cat does not fit a flat screen. That's a live cat. So I took this picture about my cat. His looks, his eyes, and so on, but you see three-dimensional. Now, because most of our pictures, a very, very high percentage, has the subject as a recognizable object, which our mind automatically converts to three-dimension, you don't think about that 2 to 3 dimensionality unless it shows up as a problem. Well, here's the problem. This picture I took in Nova Scotia, Blue Rocks, that gap between her and the water below, you cannot tell from this picture, but it is 200 or more feet. That girl who's doing the sketching sits there safely, but there's no safe way of getting there. She had to, one way or another, risk her life or have the skill to get in there. It's a dramatic scene as I saw it, and the picture does not show it. Why? Because you have no clue in here of its three-dimensionality other than the person itself, but not the depth of this area. So there is a problem. I took that picture 6 years ago and tried to improve it every time. This is my latest improvement, and it's much better than it was, but it still does not show that depth. The other one is, and I don't have the time to go through all of that, I'm just illustrating them. If you look at my picture here versus the original, this is my original. When I looked at the images, I went past it. When I looked at it the second or third time, I saw that, well, there's some light there. There might be a sunset here. And yes, there was. There's nothing falsified in that image. It's all in the raw file. I'm jumping to it. This is now in Photoshop, that file. So if I open it in what is the front end of Photoshop and Lightroom, and you will see this in these sliders, very similarly in Lightroom, if you go and see Lightroom. And all I need to do is a few adjustments here that will show you that even if I go an auto adjustment, we can begin to see a lot more. If I go full adjustment, the sky is now overexposed. The red shows overexposure. I don't have to show it. The sunset disappeared, but I do have all the details of the landscape. And if I go down with the exposure, I have that beautiful sunset. So I do have a picture, and working that picture, I can legitimately create the end result that you saw there. What happened here? In the scene, it's both the camera and the scene. The camera can only have one small range of brightness of luminosity at a time. Every shot captures a very small range of light. Like the shot has to be different if it's daylight and night, whereas our eyes adjust to it. Some of that adjustment is spontaneous. When I was there and I saw it, my view of the mountains didn't go black. It was more like this. So the raw picture captured that. The next one, this was taken here at a reserve. The camera captured the moment. This tiger was coming at me. Of course, there was a safe fence in between. And my intent was just capture the eyes. I took it at the wrong moment. And to you, this looks like a three-legged tiger. There is no clue in your mind whether this tiger is three-legged or four-legged. Well, maybe his balance, but you look at it and it bothers you, and it bothers me that there's nothing there. At the same time, in real life, I had time lapse. I've seen him or her coming, and I know that it's the leg is up there. It's not three-legged, because I see at the scene what happened before, what happened after. I moved. A tree moves. The leaves move on the tree, I mean, and you can see that the tree is in front of another tree or behind another tree. Those kind of things get lost in two dimension. So that's another reason. In this case, I should have been more careful and take the picture at another moment when at least a little bit, like on these other pictures, at least a little bit of the legs would show. In this, that's an example of the photographer, me. I saw that scene, I liked it, I liked very much. I was most impressed by the whiteness of the surf breaking on the rocks. I liked the flow out of the water here. I liked the colors in the sky that were much more intense than in this picture. So this is what I did to it. That's real. That's what I saw. Maybe it's even that a tiny bit less of all the contrast that I saw there. But that previous version would not, this one, would not quite convey the beauty of the scene as this one does. The next one, that's an old picture. I took that at least 12 or so years ago. I was very impressed by the contrast between the breaking sun and the thunderclouds in the background. The picture was much more flat than I wanted it or I saw it. So I processed it, and it did get ribbons in the competition, but I did not like it. I loved the picture, upper half of it, diagonally upper half of it. Yes, upper half, but this lower part ruined it. And I knew there has to be a way, and that way didn't come to me for a long time. The way here was when I finally realized it. If you look at it here, you can see a very faint S. An S curve in photography puts life in the image. So what I did, I intensified that curve. And now the image, now you can see that this is a mound. This is not part of the back here, like they are mushed together here. It's separated from the back. And the mound itself has dimensions because of that simple curvature. Very, very often, if you have a photograph, just give emphasis to a particular pattern that you like in there will make a huge difference in processing. So this would be an example of both the display, but also viewers. Now this is a test. Look at it so that you see it. And look at it now. You see a difference? Back and now. I think it's easy to see the difference. One has this red color for the sign. The other does not. Otherwise, the two are identical. The difference I noticed that when I looked at this picture, I looked at the clouds and took a very cursory look at the scene down there. When I put in the color, your eye gets attracted by that red color, and there's a much more chance that you will spend looking longer and beginning to see some of the details of this area, so that you see that this is the swamp, this is the trees in the water. And by the way, this is in Everglades City. So the conclusion so far is, or what we covered so far is, impact is more than just some brightness in the picture that grabs your attention. You want to grab attention and harmonious with the emotion you want to evoke. And if at all possible, you try to get something new, either in your picture or in its presentation, that it won't be been there, done it kind of thing. What attracts the viewer's eyes, that you can mostly live objects. If you see a list, usually that's on top of it. I have something else. It's live subject with a defect. you were, I'm sure, immediately attracted to that tiger's missing leg. Perhaps more than the eyes, perhaps less than the eyes. I think my objective would be to attract your attention to the eyes, but maybe it didn't happen. Recognizable objects, building, trees, whatever it is, we pick up very quickly. Bright areas in the picture attracts the eye. And in general, one tries to have a little bit of influence, like the one I showed with the red sign in the previous picture, give some impetus to the viewer to look at certain parts of the image, or look at certain parts of the image more than the others. Also, red color, as we saw it, leading lines and curves will do that. So that's a moment to stop for a few more questions, if there are any.
Maureen, would you like to comment on your comment in the chat?
Sure. I don't understand why you don't consider yourself a professional. I learned far more from you than I have from many others who wear that label. Thank you. The philosophy behind your photography is nothing short of phenomenal, and I thank you for this presentation.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Evelyn, you have
a... Yes, this is Evelyn, and I am a colleague of Bob's, and I have learned an enormous amount from Bob in all the clubs and all the meetings. He is very honest, but he's also very modest. He is a professional.
Not my definition, but thank you, Evelyn.
That's mine.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. Do we have any, Alan, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. The topic I'm interested in is cropping. I'm often torn between concentrating on the particular subject in the middle, but also wanting to get the context of the background and the subject in the background. Do you have any guidance how you balance the need or desire to focus on the actual image against the idea of trying
I think, Alan, in my remaining 15 minutes, when I will do some processing, that will be part of it. Yes, I will answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Frank, do you have a quick question?
Me? No.
Yeah, you unmuted yourself. I was just wondering why. Okay, Bob, it's all yours.
Okay, so the next one, I included that not so much for now, but for reference when you get the copy. And I put a little bit of a list here of what these clubs do. And if you see the numbering, that shows which club has which one of these. Just want to mention the Florida Camera Club, because the camera clubs in Florida have a council which gives us an opportunity, 6 opportunities a year to compete with each other Florida-wide. These are Florida-wide competitions. And also there is now yearly an annual conference here. This year, of course, it was virtual, but all previous years, even in 2020, it was actual. So I wanted to have their websites and their websites talk for speak for each other, for each of these organizations. But it's very nice to be able to see ourselves competing. The 6 are 3 digital display competitions and 3 print competitions each year. And the fourth quarter of the year, the winners of those compete for the best, for the first place. So that's it. And I'm going into some demonstrations. I will start with this one. This is a picture I took in Italy, and this is a good answer for the previous question about Lightroom, because it gives you a little more information about what you can do in Lightroom. This is a compromise between a very bright, very nice area that in Italy people love. By the way, now I'm on another screen and you don't see me facing you, you see me sideways. Here, if I open this, now I have these sliders. These sliders are pretty much the same in Photoshop and in Lightroom. And in photos, you see more or less the same, differently named. But here's one advice: if you get to these applications, don't give any attention to the name. Push the slider up, push the slider down, see what it does, and go by that. The name could be very, very misleading. For example, contrast. Yes, you get more contrast in the midtones, not really here, but you get less contrast in the darks and in the bright. So if I move the contrast, I don't get anything here in the sky. But if I move the dehaze and I move down either the exposure or the shadows, you can see that the camera did capture detail in the sky. Yet, even the auto, well, the auto does bring up a little bit of it. So in this case, it's worth always to try the auto, because it may be a better starting point than without. Here, it gives you some idea in the direction we want to go. Assessing the picture, you want the sky to be a little more, not a dominating scene, but you want a little more in the sky, which probably needs a little more of the shadows. I'm not quite sure, but really what you get most in the sky, if you go down with highlights and contrast. You would not guess that. You don't, from the names, you have to get familiar with your sliders. In the meantime, that means we lost something in the flowers. Well, the flowers, we can come down here in the color. This sign here is targeted adjustment, which says if I target this area, Now my adjustment is of this color. And I can intensify just that color. And you can see that's red. Perhaps a little bit of orange would be there as well. And the picture is already more colorful. Certainly green was more lively than that. So a little life there tells you much more about Italy. They have flowers wherever they can have flowers, bring brightness in their life. Maybe the space is very little between the buildings, but you can have that. And now it's a much truer expression of what we saw there than it was before. Perhaps this blue wall here takes too much attention for no good reason at all. We can desaturate it and it's much less obtrusive. Cropping, I would crop it probably down here because yes, what would be my decision? If I come up from here to here, did I lose anything of the meaning of the picture? Is the addition of these tiles worth of seeing the mess down here? That's what decides, in my case, whether I would crop here or not the rule of the thirds. The rule of the thirds would put this hat in the center, and indeed the rule of the third will do that. So what I will do with this, because it's real, I would again go back to that slider, go to the orange, and perhaps completely desaturate it so that it does not interfere with my message. There is nothing really I want to put in the thirds, but cutting here helped it a little bit as well. So I don't want to delve too much more on this, but I could show you how a little bit of adjustments took me a long way. Next, I would like to bring up wherever it is. We are now in not the big picture, but up here, we are in the photos. Here's a picture I took in Yosemite Valley. And again, in order to get the sky and the clouds, particularly the clouds, not burned out, I had to not underexpose. Actually, Ansel Adams made a big point. Ansel, underexposing is a mistake. Reducing the exposure below that is ideal exposure that would show the picture all right. Reducing it may be a deliberate effort in order to give you something that you can process. And Ansel Adams was famous for having so-called bad negatives from which he made his perfect pictures. But that badness was all planned. That was all very scientifically planned to be the most adjustable picture that the negative could give. In this particular case, again, I could try the auto. Oh, I'm in the wrong. Oh, sorry. I messed it up. Sorry. Back to photos. Apple uses the word, and so does many editing, but in this particular case, I have the pain of clicking it, but it gives me the right thing, so that's forgivable. Adjust gives you these sliders, and you can see that they are very, very similar to the sliders you saw in Lightroom. Brilliance will bring this up, and almost with one slider, you have the, not quite right. And I'm not going to spend time on this with the brightness, but I want to take a minute or two, that's all I have, to do the cropping in answer to Alan's question. Yes, I cropped this picture. I cropped this picture here, down here, because the reflection of the mountain is up here. So that was important for me up to that point. But with all that mess on the side here, I didn't want that. So I cropped this picture somewhere here. I like that pattern down with what is in the water. Otherwise, I might have gone further up as well. Again, this area is good, but there's a lot on the side here that is not right. Firstly, and with every image, I don't suggest sequences, but do the horizon as soon as you can. This horizon is crooked, so straighten it out. It's very little, but even a little gives a lot. So I would crop it either here in order to keep this in, or I would crop it further in because there is not much else in that part of the image. Then I get a form here, which may or may not be standard. And this, I think, is close enough to the 8x10 that I would go to standard. But if it's not, I crop whatever I like, whichever way I like the image. And I think I have the time to say thank you and hand it over to Tushita, who thankfully did not interrupt me a minute ago when 45 when reached the last minute. Thank you.
There was no way I was going to interrupt you, Bob. All right, George, it's all yours.
Bob, listen, this was great. Thank you very, very much. And if everybody would go ahead and unmute themselves, you can say a few words to Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I
Thank you,
enjoyed
Bob.
it a lot.
Thank you very
Very
much.
much, Bob.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob. Excellent. Nice, good show. It's inspiring.
Very interesting.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yes, it is.
I put the URLs for the Adobe photography plan and for Lightroom Mobile in the chat. So save the chat so you can have those and take a look and see if that's something that you're interested in. Definitely with the Lightroom Mobile, you can try it out. It is an excellent free program.